Hi, my name is Jason and I'm an application engineer here at 3M. Today we're going to have a video for you about body filler, specifically about pinholes, but I'm also going to cover a little bit on application techniques and a little bit of troubleshooting as well. Before we get started, I just want to cover a couple of things. The first is we want to make sure we're always wearing the proper PPE. In this video, I'll be wearing nitrile gloves, safety glasses, as well as a half-mask respirator. The other thing I want to mention is that this video is intended for professional use, so for all you technicians actually out there in the body shops. For any additional warranty or safety information, be sure to check the link in the description below. So one of the things I get asked about the most with body filler is where do pinholes come from, or it's a technician that's struggling with pinholes and they want to figure out how to eliminate that problem. Pinholes in body filler really only come from two things: either stirring air in as we're initially mixing the product or applying it to the panel, or an improper mix ratio of hardener into our filler, which causes it to get a little bit too hot and causes gas bubbles inside from some of the peroxide in the hardener actually boiling and gassing off. So I'm going to cover the proper way to stir, mix, and apply body filler, as well as how much hardener we should be putting in. One other thing I want to cover is make sure you're using the right filler product for the job that you're doing. Here at 3M, we make several for all types of applications. For standard body repair, most of the time we're going to be using a regular body filler. Once body filler is applied, any minor imperfections that could have come from sanding that filler, maybe we had a few little pinholes or something like that, a product we would use to fill those is a 2-part glaze. The other product that not a lot of technicians use, but it's pretty common at some larger repair shops, is a fiber reinforced filler. This is going to be for more severe areas, heavier hits, or maybe somewhere where we had to section in a new panel. It is available in a can type form. This one here is for our DMS mixing system, but this is a body filler that has fiber strands inside of it to help increase the strength of that product. So make sure you're using the right filler for the job. We do have tech sheets for all of these online that'll help you select when you should be using which one. For today's purposes, we're going to focus primarily on standard body filler. The first thing I want to talk about is how much hardener to put in it and how we're going to mix that. Our body filler, we mix 2% by weight of hardener to filler. There's also diagrams online that show you a puddle of body filler that's about the size of a tape roll, so maybe 4 to 5 inches across. We want one skinny line of hardener across the middle of it, and that should be about the amount of hardener that's needed. One recommendation I have to you is to actually take a mixing board and go put it on your paint scale and measure out 98 grams of filler and then add 2 grams of hardener to get a 2% mixture. Mix that up and let it harden, and then you know what color your body filler should be when we have the right amount of hardener in it. If it's a little too blue, we know we need to add a little more body filler. If it's not blue enough, we know we need to add a little bit more hardener. So that's just a good visual gauge and an easy thing you can do in your shop to make sure that you're always mixing it properly. With that being said, let's dive into mixing up some filler. Anytime you're mixing body filler, I always recommend wearing a half-mask respirator. There is styrene and other chemicals in body filler. That's what gives it that body filler smell that when you walk into a body shop, you pick up on right away. So I always recommend wearing a half mask when you're mixing and applying filler. So I'm gonna get my mask on, we're gonna get some filler out, and let's get this stuff mixed up. So we have our body filler on our mixing board. The next thing we want to do is add our hardener. Before we add hardener, we always want to make sure that we knead the tube of hardener to incorporate all of the chemicals that may have separated inside of the tube. All those chemicals are very important to let the body filler cure the way it's supposed to cure. So don't just squeeze out any of the watery stuff and throw it away. Make sure you fully incorporate that into your hardener. Now that we've kneaded that, we're ready to put it on our mixing board. Anytime we put hardener on body filler, I recommend instead of applying it directly to the filler like most technicians do, instead we run a line alongside the body filler. The reason I like to do that is, let's say there was a chunk of something in our hardener, or maybe we didn't fully knead it and a bunch of watery stuff came out, that's not going directly onto our filler. Even in this case, I squeezed out just a little bit too much hardener. If I were to put that directly on the body filler, it would already immediately start catalyzing as soon as it touched. Because I put it on the side, it now gives me the ability to scrape off any excess hardener I didn't want to put in and move it off to the side away from my filler. Now I have the appropriate amount of hardener for the filler. I can get it mixed together. The other mistake I see pretty frequently, and it's the biggest cause of pinholes, is how we now mix this hardener into our filler. We want to make sure we don't incorporate any air into our body filler, and if we do incorporate air, we want to make sure that we're pushing it out. The common mistake I see with hardener is technicians will mix it together like this. As we're stirring it, we're incorporating a lot of air. So you'll see, even as I do this and start to mix it together, if I let this flow out for a second, or even start to smooth it out, we're already seeing holes in the body filler where there were air pockets. As it continues to settle, we see even more little bumps sticking out. All of those are air pockets inside, which if we were to go directly to the panel with that, would result in pinholes as we started to sand. So what we want to do is make sure we scoop everything up, push it out in a nice, smooth, pressured line, and then take our spreader and slowly push down and work all the air out of it. So you notice as I'm doing this, we're not getting any of those holes anymore, and we're seeing less and less bumps as I continue to work all the air out. We want to continue scooping it all up and pushing it all out with good firm pressure until our body filler has a nice uniform color. It should be a bluish gray color, more on the gray side. If it's really blue, we know we have way too much hardener in there. Another little tip, especially in the summer or in an area where it's really humid and our body filler tends to dry very quickly, sometimes before we can get it on the panel, is when we've fully mixed it, spread it across the board as much as you can. Body filler cures through a heating up process from the hardener catalyzing with the filler. If we spread that out, it lets the heat out and keeps the filler cooler longer, giving us more working time. Again, I see a lot of technicians, once they mix their filler, they leave it in a big pile in the middle. Now that heat is generating a lot inside, and our body filler kicks over a lot faster. Now that we have our filler mixed up, it's time to apply it to our panel. We always want to make sure we have a good abraded section of bare metal, whether it's steel or aluminum. Our products work on both. And what we want to avoid is putting our body filler over the paint edge. It's okay if it's over a 2K product, but every panel has some base coat on it, and base coat is a 1K product. Styrene that's in all body fillers will cause that base coat to swell. And over time, usually months after the repair, as that styrene slowly works its way back out, the base coat shrinks back down and we're left with repair mapping. I see the same thing happen in sand scratches like we see on the edge of this repair panel. If you were to fill those with filler and those sand scratches go down into the base coat, over the next few months that base coat will continue to shrink back up as the styrene comes out, and we'll be left with sand scratch shrinkage in our final repair, which means we could end up having to redo it and repaint it. So be mindful of that and make sure we're always going over bare metal. Now when we're applying filler, we want to do it in a two-step process. The first step is to put a really tight coat that's very transparent as we apply it. The reason we do that is we're forcing the body filler down into the sand scratches that are in the metal. If you press lightly, or if we take a big scoop and push it on, it's harder to push that down into the scratches because it acts more like a sponge. We want as much direct contact with the metal as possible, really pushing that body filler in. Once we've done that, we can take a little bit more filler, and now we can do our build coat, acquiring the smoothness and the build to fill any dents or imperfections that may be in the panel. What I like to do is once I spread it, I clean off my spreader on my mixing board and push down at an angle to smooth out my edges. This just takes out some of the hassle with sanding it and feathering it out and makes that process go a little bit smoother. Once I do that, I'll give it one final spread to even it out and make it nice and smooth on top. And we can do the same to this one as well. So again, we're going to do a nice tight coat, staying within that paint edge as much as possible. Grab a little more filler, and now we'll do our build coat. Once our build coat is done, I'll again smooth out my edges to make my sanding a little bit easier. Making sure to get as much off that paint edge as possible. Now I'm ready to give one final pass to smooth out any ridges that I may have in there. Now we're ready to let this sit and let the body filler cure up really nice. And in about 15 to 20 minutes, we'll be ready to sand it. So as a reminder, if you're having trouble with pinholes, they could really only be coming from a couple of places. One was stirring air into our body filler as we're mixing it. So as a reminder, make sure we're pushing the air out using good firm pressure with the spreader. And don't stir the body filler by putting a lot of air into it in the can either. If you do, it's okay, but make sure you take extra time to push all that air out before we apply it to the panel. The other cause of the pinholes was using too much hardener, causing the body filler to get a little bit too hot and boil the peroxide inside, causing gas bubbles. Those, no matter how much you push out, will still form, so make sure we're using the right amount of hardener. If you still end up with pinholes, the best solution to take care of them is using something like glaze, but make sure it's a 2K glaze. We don't want to use a 1K product to fill pinholes. Any glaze that comes just in a tube by itself like this is a 1K product. If you put that into pinholes, it's going to shrink up. There's chemicals in there that make it spreadable. Those evaporate out to make it lock up. All of that is going to leave the pinhole, leaving you with a little tiny skin over the top, which as soon as we spray primer or sealer could punch through that, making the pinhole visible again. So the best way to fill them is to take a 2K product, mix a little bit on your mixing board, and then you can use a new scraper or use a razor blade that's much smaller than this and forcibly push that 2K product down into those pinholes, let it dry, and sand it smooth. If you miss any micro pinholes that are in there, the best place to fix those is once we apply primer. In order to get them to fill, we need to make sure that we're using a small tip on our primer gun, so a 1.4 or a 1.6. And make sure we keep the air pressure high so we atomize that primer really, really fine and it gets down inside of those pinholes instead of lowering our pressure and using a large tip, which makes big drops of primer, which could end up going on top and bridging that pinhole instead of going down inside of it. If it bridges the pinhole, once we start sanding and remove that bridge, the pinhole will be open again and we may not see it until we get to paint, which could cause us to repaint the vehicle after. If you struggle with mixing your body filler properly, or you're in a hot or really humid area and it just cures too quickly before you can get it all on the panel, a good solution for that is going to a dynamic mixing system, or our DMS system as we call it. This system, instead of taking the product out of a can or out of a tube and mixing it by hand, it uses a cartridge that has both the product and the catalyst in the right ratio in a cartridge that goes onto the gun. The nice thing about this is you can apply it directly to your spreader using the gun and apply it, and every time we pull the trigger and squeeze more out, we're getting a fresh working time in the tip of this. So you could do a massive repair area in a very humid area and keep applying filler to your spreader and slowly work your way down the vehicle without it hardening up too quick. The other nice thing with the DMS system is it eliminates pinholes for mixing. So if you're having a lot of pinhole issues, this is another system that may help you as well. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found our tips around body filler helpful. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you like this video and you want more content like this, be sure to check us out at 3M Collision Repair Academy, which I left a link in the description below. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.